Oscar nominee Timothée Chalamet took some heat during his award season campaign for comments hyping up his talent.
If people want to see it like Barbie, like Oppenheimer, they're going to go see it and go out of their way to be loud and proud about it. And I don't want to be working in ballet or opera or, things where it's like, hey, keep this thing alive, even though no one cares about this anymore.
Before we begin, this video is based on publicly discussed statements, media coverage, and ongoing reactions surrounding comments attributed to Timothée Chalamet. At the time of recording, interpretations of his remarks about opera and ballet vary across outlets and audiences. This video does not aim to misrepresent, accuse, or take statements out of context. Instead, it focuses on understanding what was said, how it was received, and why it sparked such a strong reaction. Viewer discretion is advised, and it's important to approach this conversation with balance, context, and an open mind. There are moments in entertainment when a single comment, even one delivered casually, can ripple far beyond its original intent. That's exactly what happened when Timothée Chalamet found himself at the center of a growing conversation involving opera, ballet, and the role of traditional art in modern culture. At first, it didn't seem like a major issue. It was just another interview, another moment of candid expression. But within hours, clips began circulating, headlines started forming, and suddenly the discussion shifted from casual commentary to something much bigger. What makes situations like this so fascinating is how quickly perception can change. One moment, it's a thoughtful or even playful remark. The next, it's framed as controversial. And once that framing takes hold, it begins to shape how people interpret everything that follows. In this case, the reaction wasn't just about what Chalamet said, it was about what people believed he meant. To understand why this moment gained so much attention, you have to look at the cultural weight behind opera and ballet themselves. These are not just art forms. They represent history, discipline, and a level of tradition that stretches back centuries. For many, they symbolize artistic excellence at its highest level. So when a modern actor, especially one with as much visibility as Chalamet, appears to question or critique those traditions, it naturally draws attention. But context matters. And one of the challenges in moments like this is that context often gets lost as clips are shortened, shared, and reinterpreted. What might have been part of a broader conversation about evolving art forms can quickly become a headline that feels more definitive than the original statement ever intended. This is where the conversation becomes more nuanced, because there's a difference between criticizing an art form and questioning how it fits into the modern world. And that distinction isn't always clear when people are reacting in real time. Some viewers interpreted Chalamet's remarks as dismissive, suggesting that he was downplaying the importance of opera and ballet. Others saw it differently, viewing his comments as part of a larger discussion about accessibility, relevance, and how traditional art forms connect with newer generations. That divide is important because it highlights how the same words can be understood in completely different ways depending on the listener's perspective. Hollywood's reaction added another layer to the story. Industry figures, performers, and commentators began weighing in, each bringing their own experiences and viewpoints into the conversation. Some defended Chalamet, arguing that artistic expression should include the freedom to question tradition. Others pushed back, emphasizing the importance of respecting art forms that require years, even decades of dedication. And then there were those who chose a more measured approach, suggesting that the conversation itself was more valuable than taking sides. What's interesting here is that this isn't a new debate. The tension between tradition and modernity has existed in the arts for generations. Every era brings new voices, new ideas, and new ways of interpreting what came before. Sometimes those ideas are embraced. Other times they're met with resistance. Chalamet, whether intentionally or not, found himself at the center of that ongoing conversation. It's also worth noting the role of media amplification. Once a story begins trending, it doesn't just spread, it evolves. Headlines become sharper, opinions become stronger. And before long, the narrative can feel more extreme than the original moment itself. This is where responsibility comes into play, both for those sharing the story and those consuming it. Because when information moves this quickly, it becomes easy to react before fully understanding what's being discussed. Another factor to consider is Chalamet's position in the industry. He's not just any actor. He represents a younger generation of performers who are navigating a rapidly changing cultural landscape. His words carry weight, not just because of who he is, but because of what he represents. That visibility means that even offhand remarks can become part of larger cultural discussions. And in this case, the discussion goes beyond one individual. It touches on broader questions about the role of classical art in a modern world dominated by digital media, fast-paced content, and shifting audience expectations. Opera and ballet, by their nature, require patience, attention, and a deep appreciation for craft. They don't always fit neatly into the quick consumption model that defines much of today's entertainment. So when someone questions their relevance, even indirectly, it can feel like a challenge to the values they represent. But questioning doesn't necessarily mean rejecting, and that's where the conversation becomes more complex. Because it's possible to respect tradition while also asking how it evolves. Some of the strongest reactions to Chalamet's comments came from those who have dedicated their lives to these art forms. For them, opera and ballet are not just performances. They are disciplines that demand years of training, sacrifice, and commitment. Hearing them discussed in a way that feels dismissive can be difficult. At the same time, there's another perspective to consider. Art has always changed. What was once considered unconventional can eventually become part of the mainstream, and new interpretations often come from those willing to question what already exists. That doesn't make the conversation easy, but it does make it necessary. This is where tone becomes critical, because in moments like this, how something is said can matter just as much as what is said. A comment intended as thoughtful can be received as dismissive if the tone doesn't align with the audience's expectations. And once that perception takes hold, it can be difficult to shift. Another layer to this story is the way audiences engage with controversy. In today's environment, strong reactions often drive visibility. The more polarized a conversation becomes, the more attention it receives. That dynamic can sometimes overshadow the original topic, turning a nuanced discussion into a simplified debate. And when that happens, important details can get lost. It's also important to consider how quickly public opinion can form. Within hours of the initial clips circulating, people had already decided where they stood. Some defended Chalamet immediately, others criticized him just as quickly. That speed leaves little room for reflection, and reflection is often where the most meaningful understanding happens. For Chalamet, this moment is another example of what comes with being in the public eye. Every statement, every interview, every offhand remark has the potential to become part of a larger narrative. That doesn't mean he shouldn't speak openly, but it does mean that his words will be interpreted, analyzed, and sometimes reshaped by others. This is the reality of modern media, and it's something that affects not just actors, but anyone whose voice reaches a wide audience. At the same time, it's important not to lose sight of the bigger picture. This conversation isn't just about one actor or one comment. It's about how we talk about art, how we value tradition, and how we navigate the space between respecting the past and exploring the future. Opera and ballet have survived for centuries because they continue to adapt, they evolve, they reinterpret, and they find new ways to connect with audiences. That process isn't always smooth, but it's part of what keeps them alive. So when someone raises questions, even unintentionally, it can become part of that evolution. That doesn't mean every critique is valid, but it does mean every conversation has the potential to add something new. And maybe that's the most important takeaway from this moment. Not whether one person was right or wrong, but how the conversation itself unfolds. Because in the end, art is not static. It's shaped by the people who create it, the people who experience it, and the conversations that surround it. And sometimes, those conversations begin with a single comment that no one expected to matter as much as it did. We'll continue to follow this story as more context and perspectives emerge. Until then, stay thoughtful, stay curious, and always look beyond the headline.